2025. Hopefully you're expecting us to be talking about Welsh language user research. Hopefully that's why you signed up. So if you're not familiar with Services Week, it's a supported, self-organised series of events to increase service literacy and to create an exchange about good service transformation across government. So really great to have you all here. Thank you for dialing in. And there's a hashtag as well, which I've been told to tell you about. So if you do feel inclined to share anything on social media, it's hashtag Services Week. You can also have a look at the other talks that are running this week on services.blog.gov.uk. So our talk today, we're going to be talking about how to do Welsh language user research when things aren't perfect. So we'll start off with a bit of an introduction and talk to you a little bit about how we've navigated learning this. So we've actually done some research ourselves, which is a bit meta, but we wanted to share our learnings on that. So we'll share our reflections more than a set guide or tips on how to do it yourself. It's more our reflections and learnings from what we've learned from doing this ourselves and also working with our community, which we'll share a little bit more about later. So we'll be talking about considering bilingualism in your research, the realities of researching with Welsh language users, and also planning and running your Welsh language user research. We'll then talk about next steps for this work and also have some time for questions at the end. So a little bit about us before we dive in. So we are CDPS, the Centre for Digital Public Services, and we partner with Welsh organisations to deliver public services that work for everyone. And we're an arm's length body to Welsh Government. We've got 4 main services, so we're a service organisation, and as you can see here, we've got Meet the Digital Service Standard for Wales, so we do actually have our own service standard in Wales, and this is where we run things like service assessments and support people to actually meet that standard. We've also got Learn Digital Skills, and this is where we offer training to support digital capability building in the sector. We've got Design and Improve Digital Public Services, so this is where we work with external organisations to support them on project delivery. And then we've also got Connect with other digital professionals, and this is where we offer our communities of practice and also events. As I mentioned there, we've got our digital service standard for Wales, and the work that we've been doing has actually directly led into that. So we're excited to share a little bit more about how we've done that. But essentially the standard shows what good public services look like in Wales and how to achieve them. And just to introduce ourselves quickly, so my name's Gabi, I'm a senior user researcher at CDPS, and we've also got Tom Brame on the call as well, who is a user researcher at CDPS. I believe we've been spotlighted, so hopefully you can see both of us, but Tom's going to talk a little bit more about how we went through things as well. So just to touch on why our context is unique in Wales and why it's slightly different to England. So in Wales, we have to adhere to the Welsh Language Measure and also the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And basically what this means is that we're legally obliged to ensure our services are designed bilingually and also for the future social, cultural, environmental and economic well-being of Wales. So we embed these in everything we do. And just to touch on the community, so I've mentioned a little bit about our Connect service. So we do run as part of this a user research in Wales community, and we'd love for you to join if you're not a member already. I'm guessing this is of interest to you as you're on this call. But we started in April 2023, and this is something we're really proud of. We've grown to over 170 members, and we're open to cross-sector in public sector here. So we support those people who either do user research or are interested in it, and we're basically there to support the profession and grow in the profession in Wales. So I think something quite unique about the way we're working is it is that cross-sector. So we're really looking to build the capability in Wales. We're aware not everyone's in a user researcher role, and we're really open to, I think we've got people like service improvement, we've got business analysts, we've got digital officers, so we're really kind of open to building that practice, and we recognise not everyone's in those formal DDAT roles as well. And a bit of a background on why we've done this work. So we noticed that many user researchers in Wales were not feeling confident in conducting or able to conduct Welsh user research. But we also saw that lots of people in the community did have experience of doing this successfully. So we really wanted to build on what they were learning and the best practice that they were seeing. And we saw the opportunity to co-design some guidance for the service manual together through the community. So we wanted to help support user researchers and build on why people were feeling not confident, but also look at the success that others were having. And I think just to zoom out, if we look at a perfect scenario, not that this ever exists, we would probably have a confident Welsh-speaking user researcher, Welsh content design, and then also a Welsh-speaking participant. But I think what we really want to emphasise is it's okay if you don't have this. We know that this is basically a unicorn scenario. So we're here today to kind of hopefully share some support if you don't have all of these things in place. And just to be completely honest, it's rare we have this as well. You know, it's really hard to achieve this perfect scenario. I think most importantly, though, what we really need to focus on is being inclusive of Welsh language users. So being aware is the first step, and just offering that research experience that is comfortable and enables them to contribute to designing better Welsh language services. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, how can we make that start? And this is an example that hopefully the Welsh language speakers in the room will find funny, but I'll elaborate for those who don't. So designing in Welsh is not a tick box exercise, but unfortunately it often is treated as such. So what we mean by this is that typically the Welsh language is included retrospectively by translating the English at the end. And this doesn't work, you know, as with all good UCD work, you want to involve it from the start. And this actually reads, so alcohol and them actually reads free alcohol, which I'm guessing Asda did not mean to print in their store. So, you know, this just demonstrates how if you'd involved that from the start, Osham wanted free alcohol, there you go. Then yeah, that hopefully wouldn't have happened. I'm going to pass over to Tom now to talk about what you should do when things aren't perfect.
Thanks, Gabi. I was half expecting to see the number of people on the chat just diminish there as they all leg it to Asda to get their free booze. So yes, I'm going to quickly run through some of the things that you can do when things often aren't perfect. And I'm going to use our user research community as a bit of a case study. So as Gabi mentioned previously, we were having conversations in our community and our community members were voicing concerns about conducting research with Welsh-speaking participants, particularly in often imperfect scenarios where they aren't a fluent Welsh speaker themselves, they don't have the means or the resources to be able to do what they think is the perfect research. So we felt it was an opportunity to work together to develop some guidance to help support both our members and others outside the community. So here's what we did. We took a bit of a community of action approach. So we've never really marketed ourselves as a community of practice. We've always been a bit of a community, but in this instance, we wanted to be a community of action. We wanted to kind of co-design something, build it together and try and implement it together. So we started by hosting an in-person half-day workshop in Cardiff, where we invited all the members of our community, but we also invited a content designer who works at CDPS, who would be writing the guidance, and some colleagues from the Welsh Language Commissioner. We had 30 people attend from different orgs across public sector, which included Public Health Wales, Social Care Wales, Monmouthshire, as well as others. And we had various activities designed to enable the community to co-design principles for how to do Welsh language user research within the constraints and barriers that they're facing. We created some researcher personas to prompt varying scenarios for user research ability and confidence levels with Welsh language. And we had various method types and topic sensitivities that we kind of assigned to each of those to really get people thinking about the different scenarios that might come up. We also asked our user research to share their first-hand experience and their thoughts and kind of practical ways of tackling the challenges we were coming up against. And I think I'm handing back to Gabi.
Thank you, Tom. So what we learned through doing this, as I mentioned, we've broken this down into themes. So the first is around considering bilingualism in your research as a first step. So obviously I've mentioned this in the example I used earlier. Considering the Welsh from the beginning prevents problems and saves you time and effort. So it might sound really obvious, but I think it's overlooked in a lot of what we do. And, you know, we can start by just thinking about that in our initial planning of projects, you know, considering what does that Welsh language stream of work look like and how can we do this well? Because like I've said, if you do it at the end, you're probably going to miss stuff and it won't be as successful. And I think in that vein, including extra time in your delivery plans, like this does take extra time. It will take extra skills and resources. You can't just shove it in at the end. So I think, you know, we need to make sure that it's in our delivery plan to make time for iterations, designing the content itself, extra time for translations, things like that. And hopefully this is coming through already, but some Welsh language is better than no research at all. So make sure that you're doing a little bit, even if you know you don't have that perfect scenario, you know, how can you still do a little bit? So could you think about doing a translated survey, even if you don't speak Welsh yourself? Could you look at using Welsh language prototypes, but actually facilitating through English? You know, there's ways to kind of scale back rather than looking at that perfect scenario and being intimidated by that to the point that you don't do anything. But in the same vein as well, I think, you know, it is important to say that you can't do this properly without dedicated resource or support. And I think a commitment as well from your organisation. We need to be in a position where it's not just us pushing for it. We do have people around us that really appreciate and have that commitment to why this is important to do properly. So yeah, consider what capability and skills you have in your team and what you might need to outsource. So have a think about whether anyone in your team can communicate in Welsh and how, or potentially somebody outside of your team where necessary. Your confidence and areas of comfort. So something we learned through the community is that just because you've got an ability doesn't mean you'll necessarily be confident to run research in Welsh language. It's a different skill. And also who or what else might be able to help as well if it's not available in your immediate team. And I'm going to hand back over to Tom.
Thank you, Gabi. So I'm going to quickly explore some of the realities of Welsh language user research, paying attention to some important considerations. One of the first and one of the most important is that there is no standard Welsh language user. Traditionally, I think there's been little thought given to types of Welsh-speaking user. I think there's an assumption that if you speak fluent Welsh, you will use Welsh services and that's it. But what we discovered is that they're all different kinds of Welsh language user with different kinds of needs associated. And there are fluent Welsh speakers who prefer to use English services for various reasons. Often that's because the Welsh version of the service is the standard is poorer than the English service. There may be people who choose to use services bilingually. So they may use a Welsh service and have to toggle back and forth between Welsh and English on specific complex terms, or if there's certain things they don't understand and they need to sense check. There may be people who are comfortable speaking Welsh but not reading Welsh, so they'll want to speak to a Welsh speaking call centre worker, but they'd actually use the English language online service. So there's all kinds of variations and many more. The HMRC put together a really great set of user personas as well for Welsh language service users. This is just one example. We don't have the actual resource to hand, but it helped break down that Welsh language user into, I think, 5 or 6 different kind of persona types to help us think a bit more outside the box. So that this example is called the Welsh reawakening. Sorry. So it's someone who has Welsh language skills, but they've lain dormant for a period of time, and there's something in their life that's prompted them to kind of reignite the drive to access kind of Welsh services and do things through the medium of Welsh. The next consideration is around the researcher themselves. So there may be some people on the call today who are fluent Welsh speakers. That doesn't mean to say you are immensely confident speaking Welsh or doing professional activities through the medium of Welsh. So this one's quite personal to me because I put myself in this bracket. So what we found here was that experienced user researchers may be fluent Welsh speakers, but they may not feel comfortable facilitating interviews in Welsh, for example. There can be an expectation from colleagues that if you're a fluent Welsh speaker, you should be able to do research through the medium of Welsh. And personally, as a fluent Welsh speaker, but not as someone who speaks it in their everyday life, I feel really unconfident and uncomfortable doing that. So there's some consideration to be made, and it may be, yourself as the researcher who's feeling this, or maybe colleagues who make an assumption that because you speak Welsh, you can do this. So it's okay to kind of push back on that, I guess, and consider it. Another consideration that came up was that one person can only do so much. So there may be some organizations, Welsh speakers, fluent Welsh speakers are a rare breed. So if there's a Welsh speaking user researcher somewhere who is confident doing Welsh research, then there can be a lot put on their shoulders. They can be in really high demand and maybe asked to support multiple projects simultaneously. So obviously that can be really stressful and pressurizing, but also it means that they don't really get to have the reward of seeing a project through, and it can be quite unfair, to put it bluntly. So that's another consideration that we wanted to set out. It's best to identify what you're comfortable with first, understand your own limitations before you start planning your research. Then you can plan around that. So once you've decided that, you can adapt your approach, your methodology. So for example, if your Welsh language skills aren't particularly strong, perhaps you choose to do a survey in Welsh that you can get translated, as opposed to trying to do some face-to-face research or usability testing, whatever it may be. Involve your colleagues to help run or support the sessions. You can get help from a translator or an interpreter. And there's an important distinction, which I think is going to be covered a little bit later. And set clear expectations with your team, your stakeholder, and in particular your participants. There's one kind of exception to our rule, and that's when we're talking about complex and sensitive research. You don't want to risk any harm to the participant, to yourself, and to the research by going into sensitive research kind of unprepared or not able to kind of meet the participants' needs fully. So if it's a sensitive project or topic, then this is an instance where we wouldn't really advise you to try and do Welsh language research if it's outside of your ability. And I'm handing back to Gabi again.
Thank you. Okay, so planning and running Welsh language user research. So what we've learned is that participants often appreciate the consideration of the Welsh language in research and the design of services, even if it's not perfect. So they're so used to, bless them, the Welsh language not being considered, that actually if we just try, it will go a long way. And I think we've learned through the community there's a real misconception around wanting to or needing to get it perfect, because the expectation of Welsh speakers is very high, and what we're learning is that isn't true, and like I've said, doing some is better than none. And also participants appreciate honesty around your limitations up front. So what we've been trialing is including that in our communications with them up front. So being really clear that, maybe you can't facilitate the user research in Welsh, but you might have Welsh language content that you can test, and you can talk through English, or you might be able to do your consent forms in Welsh, but then maybe there's a part that you can't, or just being honest up front so that they can decide if that's appropriate or not, because like Tom said, actually in a sensitive topic they might feel better speaking about that in Welsh and might not be comfortable talking about it in English. So it's just giving them the options and finding a way that both of you are comfortable with and is not going to compromise the design of the research. And if you need the help of a translator or interpreter, it's important to consider how best to involve them in your research. So, like Tom said, they can be a fantastic resource, but we've learned a lot about the nuances of how to work with those people. Typically, these roles aren't included in DDAT, or they're not used to working in Agile. So, it's something to consider. And to be fair to them, like, how can you best involve them so that they're going to get the most out of working in this way as well? So what we've learned is that translators tend to focus on written language, and interpreters better understand the nuances of the spoken language and non-verbal communication. So it's really important to pay attention to the difference. And to be fair to them, they're not researchers. So, you need to think about how can we best work with them. For instance, is it better to get translators to translate something and then, like I say, test in a language you're more comfortable with? Or could it be better to have an interpreter there in the session with you? Things like that. And something we've also learned through our work with the community is that introducing someone else to that research session could cause an unintended barrier to the design of the research. So we had an example someone shared where they were doing sensitive research, and then having someone to translate that really kind of caused that barrier and friction, and then kind of compromised the quality of the research, because you're not able to build that rapport in the same way. So I think it's just important to include them in the design of the methodology. Don't think about it at the end. Think about it up front when you're designing your research plan. And each translator and interpreter has different background skills and areas of comfort too. So just have that open conversation with them up front and set clear expectations about how you can best work together. And an idea as well is that you could debrief with them to learn about what worked and what didn't, so that you could improve in the future too. This might sound like a slightly obvious one. As we all know, recruitment's hard, but it is especially hard with Welsh language users. There's much less of them, so it can be hard, and we really acknowledge that. But again, start early. If you know that that's going to be a factor, then make sure that you're using every opportunity to do that up front. And if you can't find real Welsh language users, and what I mean by real is real users of your service, you can test with non-users who still speak or understand Welsh as a compromised situation. So, do you have colleagues who speak Welsh, etc. And I think Tom touched on this a little bit earlier, but be aware that participants might prefer to use English technical or government terms while speaking in Welsh, and familiarise yourself with the language they may use. So I think we've had situations where, people have expressed that at home they're very comfortable with using Welsh. It's their first language, and there's much more informal, casual language that they use with their family. But when they come to work, they're not used to using Welsh at work. So then there's that difference. So it's really important to recognise that a Welsh language user, like Tom said, is not a static thing. They might not use Welsh for every context in their life, but they might be able to understand the language, but might not necessarily do their tax return in Welsh. So it's just to be aware of that. And then just a final point on this is to ensure that you've got bilingual materials available, just to make the experience more inclusive. So this is something that you could work with a translator on. So, sign-up forms, consent forms, discussion guides, glossaries. You can also try pair writing this with a translator or another colleague who speaks Welsh. So you might be familiar with the work we've done in trio writing. If not, definitely check it out. It's on our website. We really recommend that as an approach to do content design as well. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Tom.
Cheers, Gabi. So we're coming to the end of the presentation now, but one more section, which is around next steps. It's not very extensive, as you'll see, but obviously we encourage you to try this out yourself. If it's something you haven't done yet, but you feel like it might be a possibility, please do try it out. Obviously, we'll be sharing a link now to the guidance. What we would encourage in terms of next step is, if you do that, just try to keep iterating your process, try and keep learning, encourage feedback from, in particular, your participants, but from your colleagues, other user researchers, any translators or interpreters that you work with. This isn't a science, and as we've recognized multiple times, it's an imperfect situation more often than not. And it's just about doing the best we can within those constraints and continually learning and trying to improve. So if you are interested in this set of guidance, there's a QR code here that links to our service manual, and the Welsh language guidance is part of that. So I'll give you a moment in case you wanted to just take a snapshot of that. And I've already shared it in our chat, but we would welcome whoever's interested to join our user research community as well. Again, here's the QR code. You're all welcome. It's very much a case of the more the merrier, and you don't have to be a user researcher to join. And that's it from us. So we'll hand it over to you for a moment. If you have any questions, now's an opportunity to raise them or pop them in the chat. So over to you.
It's always funny getting a virtual round of applause, isn't it? Okay, we've got a hand up. Monica, did you want to come in?
Yes, sorry, I don't even know where to look because I'm now on this screen that seems to have a camera, and I want to use my laptop one. And so now I've just managed to make myself black. Anyway, so thank you so much. Now I've got a camera. Yay! No. I wanted to ask you, sometimes there is a lot of resistance from the people making decisions and budget owners about the provision for Welsh language speakers, because of course numbers aren't particularly high when it comes to using some of the digital services outside Wales. I work for civil service jobs and we have a bilingual functionality, but it is sometimes really hard to get buy-in from seniors to, I guess, do that initial investment on user research and on the co-design and creating the content rather than actually translating. So anything that you can share, any tips? We've engaged with the trio writing team already, but yes, it's just the buy-in from seniors that is a little bit of a challenge. Thank you. I'll try to find my camera.
So I think it's probably fair to say that actually we're really blessed in Wales that we have the acts that we have to adhere to, and that is a blessing. I think probably it's more of a challenge in central government, I would imagine. So I used to work in civil service, and I wasn't working in spaces where we had to do Welsh language at that point, but I know that there are actually some success stories recently that I've seen where civil service departments are actually doing Welsh language user research and user-centred design quite successfully. I believe there's some teams in the Ministry of Justice that have had some success with that. And HMRC are actually doing some great work too. So perhaps we could put you in touch with some people, because I would imagine they've had success with that buy-in from senior stakeholders. But yeah, I think because we're in quite a different setup in Wales, it's probably a little bit different where we're coming from. Tom, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I don't really. We have the leverage of those standards. I guess, I mean, you could argue that you're compromising the inclusivity and accessibility of services and content by not making them kind of meaningfully bilingual. But yeah, I don't know how that flies with seniors, really.
I think, yeah, it's DFE have started to look at this as well, and I think hopefully you can prove. I know that the numbers are small, but obviously if we are talking about inclusion, we're also talking about language, and I think language in central government is sometimes deemed to mean foreign languages from abroad, but actually we are talking about Welsh too. So I don't know if when you're doing your kind of participant recruitment criteria, you could just aim to include one Welsh person. That could be a kind of low-hanging fruit way to just weave in the thinking, but not kind of, yeah, break the project plans or anything. Yeah, Tom.
Just to quickly say that Lauren's put an example in the chat of what they've done at HMRC, where they've tried to elicit empathy from senior stakeholders by using things like quotes and clips of Welsh people struggling with the content they've had. So that could be a contributing factor to try and change the tide. So yeah, it might be worth reaching out to them perhaps.
Definitely. Any other questions? Thank you, Monica. Take that as a no. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll finish there. I think Tom's got a couple more slides.
Yeah, just to say thank you very much for everyone for coming along, for sticking around. Hopefully what you got from today will be useful, you can take forward. Please let us know if it's something that you do end up going away and using, or if there's any way we can support you further with that, then we'll get in touch and we'll do our best. The only other thing to say, I think, is that if you want to kind of share what you've been doing today on social media, then you can use the Services Week hashtag. But yeah, it's just a massive thank you from Gabi and I, and yeah, have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all.